for a while with one of the storylines, and then I moved into the novels, and I never finished the whole story. We had a couple of books and collections that told complete stories, but I never finished the last storyline that I started. And so I went to look at that and thought, you know what? I've changed a lot. It's been over a decade since I did the last Star Child story, which was a short story. And I changed enough as a storyteller that I would want to change the early parts. The problem is, there's a lot of good stuff in the comics, and I don't want to dishonor that. You know, I wanted the stuff that was good to still be good and still be something you can read. But I would have changed the story because I've learned so much writing the novels. So we decided we're going to do one last big, super gorgeous edition of the book that has all the comics in it. And then I'm going to retell the story using all the powers I have now and everything that I've learned in a new series of illustrated books called Fool's Hollow. And there are going to be 5 of them. And the first 2 cover all the stories and more that are in the big Star Child book. And then I'm going to finish the story I started telling more than 20 years ago, the way that I can tell them now. And it's going to be a more square volume. Mike Mignola, that does the Hellboy books and comics, he did a book with a writer named Christopher Golden called Baltimore. And it's more of a square format book that had illustrations. So I want to do a book like that that has double-page spreads and spot illustrations and character portraits and title chapter header illustrations. And that's underway right now. We may be announcing the new deal for that on Monday. We're talking to the publishers right now, and they're pretty excited, and I'm excited, and that's going to be the best way to do it. So the comics, this is the one edition of the comics. And just so you know, I should say this, I have a great moderator who's going to pay attention to the time because I can run out the clock pretty good. But I'll tell you now, before anybody leaves this room at the end of this panel, I brought copies of the first Essential Star Child paperback to give as a thank you for coming to support me and being on this panel. So make sure you come up here and grab one of these. And then anybody that wants to, I'll be back at my booth for the next 2 days, and we'll have copies of the Essential Star Child book, the big limited edition, because today is the first day it's been on sale anywhere. We shipped copies out to all the Kickstarter backers. The rest of the international copies went out yesterday. So these are the first copies on sale. They're not even on the website yet. And I thought, you know what, I'd like to give people a taste of what it's like. So I've got one of these for everybody here. It's also got a postcard in it that tells you about all the Dragons novels that I do. And on the back is the Meditations books, which is the Drawing Out the Dragons book about the car accident and the things that I do and how to make choices to do something great with your life. So wanted to make sure that nobody left today without getting your free swag.
Wow. You're doing really good on that.
Okay.
We actually have 25 minutes.
Awesome.
Can you explain a little bit more about self-publishing?
Self-publishing nowadays has a whole different connotation, and it's a whole lot easier than it used to be. Self-publishing in comics was a badge of honor because people like Dave Sim and Wendy and Richard Peeney had done it with ElfQuest, and people like me had done it. There's an author named Scott Lynch who sells lots of books and is fairly famous, who went all fangirl geeky on me at Phoenix Comicon because he grew up on Star Child. And I'm looking at this famous author, and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm meeting James Owen. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Scott Lynch read my comics. In publishing, though, especially in science fiction, self-publishing meant you couldn't make it. That's been the stigma there for a long time. And that's been changing mostly because of the ebooks and Amazon, because it's a way to make it accessible to a lot of people. It's changing enough that self-publishing is certainly just as viable as every other means to do it. Ebooks is the easiest point of entry, but because of things like CreateSpace, you can make print copies available just as easily and fairly economically. And then things like the Big Star Child book, we did that on Kickstarter. I got lots of offers. None of the publishers wanted to pay me as much for the rights to that as they did for the novels. And their reasoning was graphic novels, it's still a tricky market, it's a harder sell. And they didn't offer me very much money. And I said, if you're not offering me a lot of money, I don't want to give up control of a book I've controlled for my entire career. So I did a Kickstarter. I did a Kickstarter for the first version of Drawing Out the Dragons to prove to publishers that an inspirational book by a fantasy and comic book guy is worthwhile. And I did. We needed to raise $18,000 to be able to publish that book the way that I wanted to. So I set up a 30-day Kickstarter. We met our goal in 36 hours. And everything after that was more support from people that wanted the book. And we ended up raising nearly $60,000 to do this beautiful hardcover edition, which meant now the trade publishers are coming to me because they saw it was viable because I proved it was. And we're going to do a trade edition. We're talking to a couple of different companies. Image Comics is going to be my preference because they have book and comic market distribution. And I tell people Kickstarter works if you're already established with a fan base. But you can start a fan base by doing ebooks. Or if you're talking about comic books or something illustrated, here's what self-publishing boils down to for me. And this is really, it's career advice about anything you want to do, but specifically self-publishing. You build your tribe. You build your tribe of people that like what you do, and you do it a person at a time. But then you keep those people on. So somebody wanting to, let's say somebody wanted to emulate Star Child and self-publish a comic book. The market and the distribution, it always varies. Nobody's going to have the same path to success. But I tell them, in building your tribe, you're either illustrating it or you're working with an illustrator. Make an art print. Make an art print of the best scene from the first issue. Take it to a Kinko's, print it on 11 by 17 cardstock, do 100 of them, number them, sign them, 1 to 100, limited edition, sell them for $10. Put that money into a war chest bank account to be able to publish a print edition. And make a mailing list of everybody you sell a copy to because they're your tribe. It's going to cost you $1.75 a piece to do them. You sell them for $10, you bank that money, you keep that mailing list, and you put on it, either attach a flyer or a postcard that says, this is from the forthcoming comic book, Super Amazing Tales. You give them the expectation that you have a bigger plan and you're working towards it. Because expectations, you're going to do something cool, is why people want to invest money in you. And every dollar they spend is an investment. Follow that up with, say, a chapbook, which is a preview. Do an 8-page, stapled together something at Kinko's that's a preview of the comic book. Mail that out free to the people that bought the art print, then take it to a show like this. Maybe get a table where you can sell those for $1. And keep a mailing list.
Well, my idea is, because I write poetry.
Okay.
I write a lot of fantasy poetry about witches, vampires, and things like that. And they're really good. Everybody says they're really good. I've got a whole stack of them. I draw some, but I'm not as good as my grandfather was, He was like this amazing artist during World War II. And I can draw enough with a lot of practice. But
With poetry, I would say if you can assemble those into some collections. Let's say, and I'm just, let's say, for example, you have enough material to do 3 collections of poetry. Put those together as ebooks. Get somebody, or design your own cover for this, something you can put up as ebooks. Put a dollar figure on them, so you're charging money. And once you've said you're charging money, give a bunch of them away. And the deal is, tell people you think are going to be supportive of it, that like the material already, the beginnings of your tribe. Give them this thing you're charging money for free. And say, if you'd be willing to consider a review, I'd like to give this to you. The reviews bring more people's attention to it. Again, keep a mailing list of anybody. It doesn't have to be a paper, it can be an email list to keep track of the people that you're giving these to. And especially the ones that give you good reviews, because I know lots of people that are productive but haven't done anything with it yet. If you had a couple of poetry books available online, I'll tell you this right now. You take one of these cards that has my email address inside the Star Child book. If you put up a book of poetry on Amazon, I will be one of the first purchasers, and I will promise to give you a review. How's that?
all right.
I'll start it.
I got spectacles. I have to put them all into the computer. That's my thing right
Well,
now.
if you get them all in and put them up, that's how you've got to start. You've got to put it out there for people. You got to put it out there to be publishing.
Okay.
Okay, next question.
Thank you.
Anybody, how about you?
With your
Mhm.
were you
Well, we've done that first. I've got two versions of the Drawing Out the Dragons book at the table. We've got the one that the publisher that we had just done a version with last year had put out, but then I have the Kickstarter editions. And my manager, I wanted to sell it to Simon & Schuster originally. She said no, and she didn't get it. She says, I don't know how to sell an inspirational book. You're a fantasy author. And she works with a lot of children's publishing, but she just didn't get it. She's like, well, maybe we could print it up as a booklet and just give it out at schools. And I'm like, no. Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul sold 14 million copies. I can put this out. And we put it out as an ebook, and we sold 4,000 copies in 2 months. And I said, we can do this. So we did a Kickstarter to do a print edition, a paperback and a trade hardcover, and we overfunded that by 130%. So I knew I had supportive people, and I knew I had a tribe, a fan base to do it. And so the next one up was going to be doing the Star Child book. And I knew we could fund it. And I hoped it would overfund, but I wasn't sure. The next one we do, there are 2 more books that are in the postcard I'll give you in the comic book that follow Drawing Out the Dragons. They're available right now as ebooks on the website, but we want to do a print edition, and that will probably be the next Kickstarter. Then, okay, this is one of those secret things that I can show you because nobody's here telling me not to.
Oh.
This is going to be the big Kickstarter we may do towards the end of the year, and this is going to be huge. A 9x12 oversized full-color art book called Illustrations and Illuminations, a meditation on 3 decades of illustration, comics, and popular culture. And it's going to be my art book with all the dragon illustrations, all the covers, and the stories we haven't reprinted. And that one is going to explode. So I have good expectations. Here's the thing: if you want to win, if you want to succeed, you have to expect to. Nobody wins by accident. You have to plan on doing something awesome. And you know, there have been occasions. I give lectures at this writing seminar that I go to, the Superstars writing seminars. Me and Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Mesta and Eric Flint, Dave Farland, and I said, there's nothing wrong with knowing you're good at something. You know, people talk a lot about pride and humility. False humility is a bad thing. It really is. Proper pride is a good thing. It's okay to know you're good at something and say, I'm really good at this. Bad pride is when you say, I'm better at this than you. When you make comparisons is when it's bad. But there's also nothing good in false humility and pretending you're not good. I'm sold this novel, Here There Be Dragons. It's in 22 languages. It's still in print and hardcover after 9 years. The first movie option was with the Harry Potter producers, and I'm working with the Lord of the Rings producers on the TV series. I cannot be humble about that and sell that. So here's the thing. No one ever inspired anyone else to greatness by pretending to be less awesome than they actually are. If you're awesome, wear that flag and inspire other people to do awesome things. That's how it works.
Next question.
It seems to me that the transition from early on with the comic books and Star Child, where it's heavily graphic, it's story, it's graphic based, to going completely to a different genre where it's more word based, illustration for covers and some maybe chapters. That seems to me to be such 2 different worlds. How did you make that kind of a transition?
Well, I held out to illustrate the novels. So every chapter has a full-page illustration. I wanted at least that much because some of the great books, Peter Pan, illustrated by Arthur Rackham. Alice in Wonderland, illustrated by John Tenniel. Treasure Island, illustrated by N.C. Wyeth. That's what I wanted to emulate. Fool's Hollow is going to have a lot more art to it. It's going more back in that other direction of lots of illustrations, big, full-page spreads, spot illustrations. Interestingly enough, the new packaging is about to come out. Simon & Schuster has a new imprint called Saga Press, meant to be a crossover between young adult books and adult books. And they're repackaging all of the Dragons novels in big fat paperbacks meant to emulate George R. R. Martin's books, and they're not going to have any art in them. And the design is definitely different than what I do, but they're going for George's market. And I'm okay with that, because George sells a freaking lot of books. And it's going to be a new look. We're going for a new audience with that, but that means I'm freed up to do more things with the art and the art book and do things with that. And so this, when my manager called, she was afraid I'd put up a fight. And I said, you know what? Are they keeping the other books in print? And she says, yeah, because that's more the children's market. And I said, then we're good. I have no problem with that. I'm still in print in hardcover after 9 years. That book is now a perennial. That's what I wanted, is that it's in libraries, it's still in bookstores. I did a signing at Barnes & Noble Desert Ridge the other night, and they sold a bunch of book one of something I put out, 2006. That doesn't happen very often, and so I'm pretty blessed. Another question back here, I think the young guy.
The young man with red hair that I swear I've never seen before. This.
That's the guy.
Okay. Yes.
What kind of dragons do I write about? All kinds. The ones in the books are mostly dragon ships, where they're real ships that are merged with a real dragon. So the dragons give them the magical ability to go between these different worlds. And some of those ships are based on real stories. Like the yellow dragon is the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Captain Nemo is in it. The red dragon is the Argo from Jason and the Argonauts in Greek mythology. But some of the dragons that I like most, there's an old dragon named Samaranth that threatens to eat people when they show up, but he doesn't really. And he likes to drink tea out of a teacup that he has to use one little claw to hook because the little tiny teacup. And he's a great big old Chinese dragon, and he's the oldest dragon, and I like him quite a bit.
Any other questions?
How are we doing on time?
We've just got a few minutes left. So I did want to ask you who your inspirations were, because you've talked about how you inspire others to be awesome by going out and being awesome. Who was there to do that for you?
A lot of different people. I'm a big reader. I came from a family of readers and teachers, so a lot of books that I read when I was a kid. My grandfather, my mother's dad, was somebody that, to me, inspired me in how I deal with people. At his funeral, I was about 11 years old, and I remember seeing people there that were famous, at least famous in Arizona, like the governor. The governor came. To me, my grandfather was a janitor and a night watchman. He cleaned a little office complex over off of University and Stapley in Mesa. And I knew he'd done other things in his life. I knew he'd been a teacher. I knew he'd been a businessman and a farmer. But then I wondered, why is the governor at this janitor's funeral? And then I learned more about what he did. And he was one of the founders of the Corporation Commission. He was one of the people that was so involved in developing the entire Phoenix area. He represented education. He represented the farming community. His brother was one of the main builders that built most of Central Mesa. All of these things that he was involved in, but he was also the kind of guy that if he saw somebody begging for change at the side of the road, would show up at the house and say to my grandmother, "We need another place for dinner." Because it didn't matter to him if somebody was wealthy or poor or what they were doing in their life. He took everybody on an equal basis, and I thought that was important. And one year, I was staying there for the summer. It was that year, actually. I was 11. I knew there was a comic book artist that drew Batman that lived in Phoenix. And I looked him up in the white pages, and I cold called him. And I said, "I'm going to be a comic book artist too, and I would love your work. I'd love to come meet you and show you my art and get some pointers." And I wasn't shy about that because my uncles were painters, and I was used to getting feedback. And he asked a few questions, and I was being very businesslike about this. And he said, "Well, can I speak to your grandfather?" And I said, "Sure." So I gave him the phone, and this artist, his name was Don Newton, invited my grandfather to bring me over to his house. And I looked at the latest issue of Batman he was drawing, and I showed him my art, and he gave me some pointers, and we went out for pizza, and I went home. And about 2.5 years later, he died. He was only 50, and he got an infection in his heart, and it killed him. But I've never forgotten that he was a professional artist at the top of his game, and some kid called him up and said, "I want to be like you and learn from you." And he said, "Okay." And a lot of that changed how I do everything in my life. So That's the kind of thing you never know. How many of you are Doctor Who fans? We got some Doctor Who fans here. Okay, Karen Gill and Amy Pond. Amy Pond is a fan of my books. Some friends of mine gave her Drawing Out the Dragons, and she likes it a lot. But Matt Smith is my doctor. And I saw a photo of him last week that had a caption, and I had my assistant Heidi track this down to make sure he said this, and she said, "It's real." And he said, if I'm walking along and some kid sees the doctor and comes over and says, "You're the doctor, and I think I love you, and you're awesome, and I want to be like you," he said, how can I not be nice to them? How could I not, take those few moments to inspire them to do something awesome because they saw somebody they admired and they just wanted to say, "I admire you." And I thought, that's the best possible thing. That's the best possible thing you can do. How can you not? I mean, even here, I get people that say, "Man, you're really working hard at this convention." I said, this is not work. This is awesomeness. I get to sit here drawing pictures for people while they come and buy my books and tell me how much they like my work. This morning, somebody, a fan of mine, delivered to me a beautiful serving tray full of bacon. I am not kidding. The staff from the food services came over and said, this guy called and said, "We're supposed to bring you bacon." Big, beautiful serving tray with some flowers artfully arranged on a pound of bacon. And I went to some of my friends to show them, and people were like, "Is that bacon?" I said, "Yes, would you like a piece?" And they said, "Really?" And I said, "Sure." And I walked through the convention today, delivering happiness and bacon to people. What better thing can you do at a comic book convention than draw dragons and give people bacon and happiness? So I think on that note, I think we
Can't imagine a better way to
that's the best way to end it. So I'm going to say, make sure you come up here to grab your book and your postcard, and thank you very much for coming today.
Let's have a big hand for Mr. Van Gogh. Definitely go visit him out on the floor. He does have these beautiful slipcase hardcovers to sell. It's just very cool. I've never seen it.
Mike, did you get your... Mike, did you catch? I did a little promotion there. Okay. Oh, there we go. I guess it's off, huh?